I'm Paul Battye, Chief Executive of Hoffman Reed, and I'd like to thank you for listening to Season 2 of our podcast, Lessons in Leadership. Over the season, I will interview talented leaders from across the globe about everything from their daily routine to their toughest career challenges. Please note that these podcasts are normally recorded 4 to 6 weeks before publication. If you enjoy the show, then please subscribe to receive the latest episodes as they are released. I hope you enjoy.
So on today's Lessons in Leadership, we have Dorothee Gnaedinger, who is the Chief Executive of Mercer Denmark. Dorothee, it's great to have you on the show with us here today.
Thank you, Paul. It's really great to be here.
Dorothee, I think if we get straight into the questions, the first question I ask everybody is how on earth did you end up in the position you're in today? What was your sort of leadership journey to be in the CEO role?
I keep wondering myself how I ended up here. No, it's probably a rather untraditional route, if one can say. So after university, I tried to save the world and was very passionate about saving the world until I realized maybe it's not as easy as I thought, and the world was not waiting for Dorothee to save it. So I was working in grassroots organizations, NGO grassroots organizations in Mexico, was working for the German embassy in Washington, DC, and then was working also for Amnesty International in London at the International Secretariat. After I finished my master's in international diplomacy and Turkish at that time, I decided to go into journalism and some financial journalism, conference production, joined a media organization in London. We very quickly focused on financial journalism, and financial journalism is so closely linked, of course, with institutional investment and pensions, that very, very easily and very smoothly I ended up in the pensions industry, working for the Pension Management Institute for a period of time, and then joining Mercer in our London office over 11 years ago. And since then I've been at Mercer and have had different roles, typically looking after larger clients from an account management perspective, from a consulting perspective, focusing on global benefits. Worked for our London office for 2.5 years, then transferred to Sweden. And about 7 years ago, they asked me to move to Denmark to set up a new practice here, focusing on servicing multinational organizations. And 7 years later, and about 3 or 4 roles later, and heading up different departments, I'm now the CEO of Mercer Denmark. So it was a steady road, and it was in essence just saying yes to different opportunities that came up.
And how have you found the cultural differences? Obviously, you've moved around the world a lot, worked in many different countries. How have you found the cultural differences, and how has that impacted your leadership style?
I would say that the fact that I've been living in so many different countries and in so many, it's not only different countries in terms of numbers, but also very different in the way people behave, feel, express themselves. So from Latin America to Asia to US to UK, and now for the last almost 9-10 years in Scandinavia. I think it just gave me quite an very good all-round understanding. Personally, I think it's still very, very important that we understand the individual that we interact with and don't have too much prejudice to start with in terms of their nationality or where they may come from. Of course, it does form certain values and certain beliefs, but we all have, or the majority of us have, very international backgrounds, and we have all personal values that influence us in our day-to-day behavior. So I'm a very strong believer to really focus with the individual I'm interacting with and understanding what their personal needs are and their motivation.
Mm-hmm. And that brings us nicely into diversity and inclusion, because a lot of what you've talked about there is inclusion and diversity in its widest possible sense. How do you go about fostering that in your organization? And how has that affected your leadership style?
Mhm. So I would say I'm quite privileged having worked for Mercer now for so many years, because diversity and inclusion has been on Mercer's agenda since I joined, actually, probably even long before. So I remember 11 years ago, Mercer had a very strong initiative and a very global initiative around particularly gender diversity. It was driven back then by Martine Verland. She was the sponsor, who is now our global CEO. And there are a lot of initiatives around diversity and inclusion. What has happened, though, is that we've moved from gender diversity into other type of diversity, so whether it's sexual orientation or ethnic diversity or others. And that is what I very much like, because it comes back to individuals and individual values, and as I said early on, individual motivation. I think what took me most by surprise was when I moved from London to Sweden. I really thought I was going to join a society and a business environment that is all about diversity and inclusion, and that everything will be fine and I can learn from the best. But even in this environment, you really quickly learn, even there are opportunities for improvement. So I don't think any country has really cracked the nut yet.
Yeah, I think everyone's got a long way to go, and there's a lot to learn. For me, when I advise organizations on this, it's all about making sure you represent your customers, making sure that you represent your shareholders, making sure that you represent your members, your employees, and if you can do that, then you're on the right track.
Completely agree. Absolutely. Yes.
So you mentioned there, actually, it's all about the individual and motivation and individual motivation. How do you personally maintain compassionate leadership with individuals when, say, performance isn't going as well as you would like?
So I think the biggest test for every leader or business leader and people leader has been Corona and COVID. I think it really shook us all up and put us out of our comfort zone. But it was really that period of time where it was all about compassionate leadership, and we've really seen a difference in terms of people who have been leading with compassion, who have been very understanding in their day-to-day management, what type of results they have been able to achieve by working with the team, versus managers, maybe one could say old management styles, or authoritarian, or micromanagement, that was not successful during this period of time. So it was really about compassion and driving understanding between employees and employers and managers and the rest of the team. We personally have not actually, we've had the best year, one of the best years we've ever had last year during Corona. And we strongly believe that it was, as in Mercer Denmark, that was, and I strongly believe, and that was also the feedback I've been receiving from the organization and also from HR, it was mostly due to our compassionate leadership style and giving trust to our employees, providing this flexibility that they needed to be able to manage their home environment and their professional responsibilities. But we've seen increase in revenue. We've seen, in a lot of cases, increase in productivity levels, or at least a steady continuation. So I strongly believe in the compassionate part.
Absolutely. I think professional services has coped remarkably well. And I guess one of the counter arguments to that is it's easier when you've got highly professional, highly skilled, highly educated people working on projects, and that work can be done from anywhere. But I think one of the points which has been brought up a few times on this podcast by the various CEOs and leaders we've had on here is really about the focus on outcomes rather than the focus on inputs. Because traditionally when you're in the office, you focus on inputs, and you need to do X, Y, and Z, when the reality is the outcome is what's really important. And by focusing on that, it's actually made working from home or working remotely much easier for people.
Yes, I completely agree. I completely agree. And arguably, we've been on that path for a few years, for a number of years. So before Corona hit, so it had helped us. We were very output focused, and when setting the goals as well in the beginning of the year, we have had regular dialogues throughout the year to ensure that the goals set in the beginning of the year, focusing on the output, can actually also be achieved towards the end of the year. We had quite a flexible approach, but it was very, we don't have specific hours when you need to be in the office. We don't have a culture of FaceTime where it is a matter of how many hours are you actually physically in the office and a manager can see you. It is very much driven, and in a professional environment, as you said, professional service environment, it is not as hard, or it can be easier to focus on the output, because it is around, for example, revenue generation or utilization, or management, account management responsibilities.
Absolutely. Whereas I know when I've spoken to some of our manufacturing clients, for example, it's been a much bigger issue for them in trying to have a remote workforce when you need people in a factory floor to manufacture products. Exactly.
Completely agreed. Yeah. But we also got in the beginning, throughout Corona, we also got some feedback from the employees. Please talk more to us. Please be more visible. So it was a learning curve. I mean, I'm not going to say that we got it right from the beginning, but that close interaction with everyone really has helped us to improve.
Well, that was actually going to be my next question. What have been some of the challenges that you faced during COVID? So you said there, the employees fed back that they wanted more interaction and more communication. How did you go about overcoming them challenges and making sure that you met the needs of the workforce?
So, sorry about that, by the way, that I just...
No, it's great. You actually led us straight into the next part.
You're in sync? No, I would say, particularly when Corona hit, we were all a little bit, oh my goodness, what does that mean to us? And I would argue that in the beginning, we had a little bit of a tendency to create this ivory tower of some managers being involved, and our risk leader and our HR leader, of course, our legal head of legal. We were all there. We were discussing. We were thinking about what we can do, and we all forgot. Oh, maybe everyone else is also in a situation that's wondering what's going on, and they would like to maybe also understand what we are discussing on at the beginning was almost day-to-day basis. So there was a much higher need for communication and regular updates. Even if we didn't have an update, everyone wanted to know that we at least met and that we were discussing a topic. So they felt we were on top of it. And in the beginning, we communicated once things were agreed and when things were finalized. But in essence, and we actually thought that communication style had worked. But then what we have within Mercer, we have global pulse surveys, so where employees provide feedback. And in addition, we did our own engagement surveys locally. And then from that feedback environment, we actually got quite a lot of input, and it was very much focused in the beginning around communication and the need for communication and increased communication. I at times felt I was repeating the same message at least 4, 5, 10 times, and I thought people must get tired of it, but they weren't. Because I had to repeat it so often, but definitely not for employees. And more towards the end, now we are getting much more feedback around the culture, organizational culture. How can we ensure that we preserve the organizational culture as everyone has been working remotely? There's a much more need around social interaction, getting to know. We've gone through a big business transformation. So a lot of new colleagues have joined us. Some colleagues have left us, and that definitely now forms the basis of needing everyone to get to know each other again and to trust each other and to build on this new organization that we have.
Mm-hmm.
It's not boring.
What are the lockdown restrictions like in Denmark on that then? Because I know they're coming to an end here now in the UK, but other places around the world they're getting even more stringent and even more tight. So what's the situation in Denmark? How easy is it for you to do those social interactions moving forward?
So we can meet socially, of course, also towards a certain a maximum amount of people can meet at the same time. Denmark is pretty much opening up again from the 1st of August. At least that's what they've been saying, because of the number of people being vaccinated. We have two ways. We need two approvals. One is, of course, being in line with local government regulations, but the other is our MMC, so Marsh-McLennan guidelines. And of course, we do need to bear in mind all the risks related to COVID, or mostly of course COVID. So we are at least planning, and we have organized a gathering on the 20th of August. So we hope it's going to go along. But right now we are 40% in the office. Mm-hmm. And then we should open up to almost 100% by the 1st of August. Mm-hmm. If there's no third wave, right? That everyone talks about. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I think we're opening up on the 19th of July, come hell or high water at the moment.
We'll be watching you first and then learn.
I know. Watch the Brits make the mistakes as usual.
Exactly. So no, we won't do that now.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking of mistakes then and lessons, what would you say are the key leadership lessons you've learned throughout your career?
For me personally, and probably the advice I would give to everyone is, and particularly in a diversity and inclusion environment, so to other women and junior women or younger women, I would definitely say, whatever opportunity you have, give it a go. Just try it. There's always in the majority of cases, there's always the opportunity to come back. And you often surprise yourself what you're able to do. So have that confidence in yourself to give it a go and see what the new talent may bring. I'm a mentor and I'm a sponsor for many people now within the organization. And I often see, and particularly for women and young women, that they overanalyze situations and they overanalyze maybe some interactions that they've had with certain colleagues or clients, or in a good way, of course, also career opportunities. And we cannot know everything. So analyzing is all right to a certain extent, but then we just have to listen to our guts and just try it, or say this is not for me, and then it's fine. But you will never get to a point where you've analyzed to that extent that you'll definitely come out to the right output, because you do not know about all the different factors. That would be one. And for me personally, particularly working in a large organization, it's also been you need to be yourself still, as much as of course you feel comfortable, and the framework, I would say, maybe not the framework allows you, but it is very important to be as true to yourself as you can. As soon as you start copying certain behavior, you feel because you're in a certain organization or at a certain level, you need to behave differently, and it is too much out of your comfort zone and how you are as a person. It just doesn't come across very authentic, and it will tire you out.
I think that was one of the points I was going to make. Authenticity. It's so core to leadership and to being able to perform at your best. Because if you're not being true to yourself, then how can you perform at your best? Because you're always going to be holding something back. Exactly.
And you're always watching your back and wonder, and did that go well? And
yeah, absolutely. So which leaders do you admire the most?
I would definitely say our current, and I'm not just saying that because I work from Mercer, but I was just speaking not so long ago at another conference. It was an internal conference, and it was focused on DEI and women in leadership roles, etc. And someone has asked me also, who would you say has been your role model? And I would definitely say that when I joined Mercer, as I said, about 11 years ago in Tower Place West, I started at the same time as Martine Verland started, who is now, as I mentioned, the CEO, the global CEO. And she was so authentic and she was so herself. And I remember one time we drove to a taxi together, and she was telling me about her 3 children and how she took a career break, and then she went back to work, and her husband was was doing quite a lot of the work at home, and she was so open, and she was also so open, for example, around the balance between home life and family life versus career and professional life. I was really, really impressed by her, because I just never expected someone like her in her position to be so much herself. And that has definitely inspired me, and has definitely given me that confidence that one can be themselves, one can have a family. I mean, as I just told you, Paul, I'm pregnant and will be going on maternity leave very soon with my 2nd child. You can have a career while having a family on the side. But I think these early conversations with people like Martine, in particular women with Martine, like Martine, has given me that confidence that it is possible. And there will always be a way to combine both. So I would definitely say, and then I was really lucky enough to have had always some mentors, some people either in the organization or outside of the organization. So Robin Ellison, for example, was one. Vince Linane has been another. Within Mercer, it was definitely John Hall, who's also been there on my side, who I could turn to and ask questions and asking for guidance. So I've actually been quite lucky to have been accompanied by some really great people, inspiring people.
And you mentioned some great individuals and role models there. And one of the things you mentioned whilst you were talking about Martine is, you know, some of the things she said to you have kept you going through tough periods. And one of my questions I've asked everybody is, how do you personally go about maintaining that work-life balance, and what keeps you going through the toughest periods?
So I would say I'm fortunate enough to live in Denmark now, where work-life balance is probably a little bit easier to keep because you're not stuck in traffic. You don't have 1.5 hours commuting times, or the tube breaks down and you're stuck. I mean, that definitely adds to quality of life, and it helps you to be able to maintain that balance. There's also in Denmark a very big understanding for also senior people to go home already at 4 o'clock, pick up your children, spend the evening with your children. Once they're in bed, you log back on and you do the rest of the work. So there's a lot of the working environment is very much built around your family and social and private environment. It's easier to combine here, Denmark, and as well as the rest of the Nordics. But at the same time, I mean, for me, maybe it's my German gene, I have no idea. I mean, work is always in the back of my mind, always, constantly. At night, when I eat dinner with family, it's always there. And I really have to force myself. I really have to force myself to stop overthinking. So I did read definitely a couple of books that have helped me to manage my thinking process, to be able to say now I'm focused on here, and I'm not analyzing certain situations because I can't really do anything about it. I am definitely trying to have regular breaks, so longer weekends at times, just taking a Friday or Monday off, which gives you this additional me time or family time, and some short trips to the sea or so. And probably one of the best things that we could have done is we bought a summer house really close to Copenhagen, and that physical distance and the change of scenery, at least to me, has helped absolutely, or has helped me absolutely to be able to switch off and focus on the nature and the family.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You mentioned reading there, and you've read a lot that sort of helps you in your thinking. Is there a book you would recommend to our listeners, our viewers, that you think, this one has really helped you and was really interesting that others might enjoy?
No. I mean, one of the latest books I read was Stop Overthinking, as I just mentioned. I just forgot the author, but that was a very good book for, and it's particularly. Sorry, I do know I focus quite a lot now on women, but it is they do actually say that this it's very, very typical trait for women to overthink, not only in a professional environment and at work, but also at home, and having a plan B, having a plan C, and having a plan D, always prepared. So that was good.
Well, my wife tells me off for that all the time. She says whenever she comes up with something, I'm always thinking of the alternatives of how we can do it.
Yeah, really? Well, maybe you should read that book.
Maybe I should.
Stop overthink it. I thought it was quite good. There was another book which is called The Subtle Way of Not Giving a Fuck.
Oh, yes. I've read that one.
Yes. I mean, it was more entertaining than anything, but there were definitely some components where you could just take it with you, just remind yourself. I mean, in essence, we all know, or we should know by now what we should be doing. But when you are in the day-to-day, when you have a to-do list which is really long, and you've got people knocking on the door, and you may have some sort of pressure with clients or with anything else, you just go back into your old habits. So it's good to be reminded at times what to do. So
yeah, absolutely. What would you say is a leadership quality which is overrated, and why do you think that?
So I often have seen people being promoted into people leader roles or leadership roles if they have been very good in the particular job that they did. So let's say really great salespeople being asked to lead the sales department, or great engineers being asked to lead the engineering department. And I had to take over throughout my career now, and particularly at Mercer, I had to take over 3 times business lines, which I had no knowledge about at all before. And the reason why they gave me the people leadership responsibilities, and not only, of course, the people, but also the business leadership responsibilities and the opportunity to make changes, was just because I had a good track record, and I was able to review processes and make changes as needed. But mostly because I had a good track record at the people management side. And I think, of course, I'm now a little bit biased, but I think that is really important. So the technical expertise in the majority of cases could be overrated. It is very important to have really great technical expertise or subject matter expertise in the team. And they could also be a right-hand man or right-hand woman of the business leader. But the business leader then herself or himself or herself does not need to be, I would argue, not necessarily to be the subject matter expert. And the higher up one comes, the less likely it is actually that people will have the subject matter expertise, and then they make sure that they hire in, of course, the subject matter expertise. But what I've also seen is that the higher one comes up, the more important the financial knowledge and the P&L management comes in the center of attention. And that's also something that, of course, P&L management is super, super important. That's the center of the majority of those job descriptions. But it should not come at the cost of the people leadership qualities and the transferable skills that a candidate brings.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you often see individuals promoted, as you say, because they're very good at what they do, but don't necessarily have the leadership skills. And I often find organizations let them down as well, because they don't often give them the leadership development programs and training that they need to go on and be better leaders when they first stepped up into those roles. Now, there's the often cited Peter principle of being promoted one step too far, and ending up in a role that you're not qualified for and not capable of doing. And I can't remember who came up with the Peter principle, but it's one of those concepts that actually you can see play out in many organizations, because in a lot of cases the individuals have just reached a level of competence and have been promoted further than they perhaps should have been, because they've not had the leadership development to help them get to the next level. Yes,
I completely agree. It may be the Peter principles. I just forgot what it was called. There's the seven-step leadership guide. So first you were the expert, then you are the leader of the experts, then you are department leader, then you are, so there are seven different steps in that academic thought leadership, and it just really outlines what type of skills are needed in the different for the different levels, and how tricky it can be if you don't step up to those new skills, and what are the potential pitfalls if you just continue with the way you have been leading before, or managing or thinking before. And as you said, organizations are sometimes not good at helping individuals to take that next step, because they've been so good in the previous step, or the previous stage. But it is in the majority of cases, it's a completely different job.
Absolutely. So I've got one last question for you, Dorothee, and that's a question I ask everybody, and it's, is there a question that I haven't asked you that you would ask if you were the interviewer?
And what do you typically hear back? What do people typically
It's varied. If you were the interviewer, what would you have asked?
There's absolutely nothing that comes to mind now, Paul. I mean, no. I think that was a really, really nice interview, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
No, and thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Paul.